Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. We are at property address 1427 Walton Way here in Woodburn. We're located at the right side of the home near the air conditioning unit. Real quick, I think this is already on the home inspection report, but that downspout there is busted. Anyway, drop it into a 4-inch cast iron clean out here. We're going to check the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is running. That is a very unique clean out to have there. I've cambered over 25,000 sewer lines. I mean, I can about count on my 2 hands and feet the amount of two-way cast iron cleanouts I've seen in my career. They're very, very rare. This is a cleanout that actually lets you go both directions. That's almost unheard of when it comes to this era of pipe. Anyhow, we're going to zero out here. Water is running. We have standing water immediately upon access. A little concerned about this line dropping into it, just being that we've got this close proximity tree right here. Anyway, we'll check that out on the way out when the line is fully drained. I've got a bathtub running pretty high volume water down the line right now. And that bathtub dumps into the line barely a foot away from where we're at right now, so we'll see to what extent that's exaggerating things. But in general, most of the bellies I get concerned about are when they are in older, rougher pipe materials like cast iron, but especially so when they are close proximity into the house, when they're immediately outside the home or underneath the house. The reason for that is if a blockage does develop, you don't have a whole bunch of leeway. A lot of blockages will break loose without people even realizing they happened. The line blocks, water builds up behind the blockage for 5 or 10 feet, what have you, and that head pressure is enough to break things loose. So when you have a close proximity situation, you have very, very little pipe to fill up to create head pressure to break things loose. And then you couple that with the fact you've got both standing water slowing the movement speed of debris down, coupled with rough pipe walls. Cast iron just rougher, a rougher textured pipe material in general. All right, transitioning here over to Transite concrete. Also appears to be 4-inch diameter. Transite concrete, if you're not familiar with it, is rather than having aggregate rock in the mix, it has asbestos fibers. It's got that asbestos word. It's not a concern like the average asbestos scenario, like your popcorn ceilings and things like that. The benefit you get out of this stuff, especially, is that the pipe joints are every 10 feet typically versus every 3 feet in regular concrete, so a lot less weak points for roots to get through. The other plus side is the pipe material remains smooth throughout its entire lifespan, where regular concrete becomes very, very rough over time. So it tends to function longer even when the line is in really rough shape and worn out. The pipe material at least remains smooth. All right, there's our main connection there at about 82 feet. We're gonna go locate that really quick here just to verify where the line terminates. And we'll take another look at things as we come back in here. Alrighty, located the camera head successfully. Line terminates at the main out here on Walton Way. The line, again, it exits out the right side of the home. That says you face the front of the home from the street. Once it gets up past the front right corner of the house, the line jaunts over. It looks like the line runs up just barely underneath the driveway, just barely in from that right side edge of the driveway. Where I get that locate and turn around and look back at the house, I'm staring up the driveway, but maybe a foot or two in from that edge. little bit of gapping there at that pipe joint, but if you look at the joint there, it's all clean. There's no evidence of dirt coming through it. That is another one of the plus sides of Transite, is it has rubber fern coat, gasketed joints, relative to regular concrete, which is grouted. When you get that kind of separation in regular concrete, there is no doubt whatsoever the joints are open to the ground. But those fern coats that overlap the joint provide inches of leeway if a joint should slip. And joints that slip don't always remain sealed off from the ground. In this case, it did, but it's very obvious when they're open to the ground. You have earthworms crawling around everywhere, dirt streaking, dirt clods, all kinds of good stuff. Anyway, all the Transite there all appears to be in good shape and drains off very nicely, and quite clean too. Now, these older lines like this, if this is a home you plan on being in for a while, especially as it relates to that Transite concrete, which is under the roadway and driveway, it really behooves you these days to keep an eye on your sewer line by rescoping periodically. That is to watch for signs that eventually what happens is the joints are usually the first thing that eventually wear out. When joints become exposed to the ground, that's where hydro erosion issues can start taking place and the line can progressively settle. The reason nowadays it's such a good idea to watch your line is because of the advent of trenchless repair systems, or semi-trenchless, like pipe bursting. If you're able to update the line before the line settles, you can take advantage of some much more convenient and often cost-saving repair techniques. And we've got some level of scale. There's a little bit of channeling in the flow line. It's very minor right now. A little bit of a groove is forming there in the flow line. There's something on the side. I don't think that's a root, though. It's completely rusted over. Generally, when roots come through, they don't just come through and just sit there like that. And I mean, that thing looks like it's been there for eons. It's completely covered in rust. It just happens to be at a pipe joint, so it looks a little suspect at first glance, but up close to it, that does not appear to be a root. It looks like it's overlapping the joint, not coming out of it, too. Some kind of debris got down the line, it looks like there. Now back in here, the flow line is looking a little more hump-shaped. The cast iron from this era does not hold up anywhere near as well as cast iron from like even your 1910s cast iron will generally outlive 1970s cast iron. The pipe walls are not as thick, the metal wasn't as good. You've got some spots in the line where I'm seeing a little bit of a hump shape in the flow line, which is often what happens when scale starts to build up over a spot in the line that begins to channel. And you're getting some gunk building up back in this area here. Yeah, at the very least here, and I'll be honest with you, cast iron, when it starts to show wear and tear, this part of the line is showing more wear and tear than the latter, 2/3 or so of the cast iron. You've got some pretty heavy buildup here in the flow line. And you can always start with jetting to descale the cast iron. That's to strip all that rust layer off. Just understand, if a pipe gets too worn out, though, jetters can damage lines or at least uncover spots that scale is covering over. It's pretty darn thick here at the start of the line, especially that location we just went through there. That rough texture there is prone. I was just going to say, it causes debris to hang up in the line because of that rough, jagged flow line. And we do have standing water here, all said and done. So, I mean, it's a line that at the very least could use some descaling, which has to be done in conjunction with a camera to make sure you've got all the rust out of the line. Knocking the rust loose is the easy part. It's blasting all of it out of the pipe that's the trickier thing to do. And that does take some time. They're usually more expensive cleaning jobs to do because of that. All right, looks like we're hitting the base of the toilet right here. Or the vent stack. Anyway, part of this line has been updated, but you've got some standing water here that begins... This is about 4 feet from the cleanout access going back into the home. Right now my camera is upside down. That flow line there is looking pretty chewed up. What I'm going to do here really quick, my 2 cents on older lines is when they get to a point where if you're having to update even a 15-20 foot section, especially when most of the line up to a point is just under grass and dirt, I really don't like seeing spot repairs done on these old lines. The likelihood you're going to get a root intrusion through a transition joint from plastic to cast iron goes up dramatically, as does settling issues. Yeah, you've got some pretty good, that's a big hump there in the flow line. And so what'll happen is I can't guarantee it unless that stuff is gone, but you can get channeling that starts to occur in cast iron, and a rust layer will build up over the top of it. And you get that hump shape like that rather than a nice round pipe bottom. So I'm going to push out here and see right where this transition to transite is. The more and more I look at this cast iron, it's the latter portion of it that we're in right now is certainly less beat up, but it too is showing its age and its wear and tear. You've got rust ridges going down the whole length of the cast iron and a level of channeling throughout most of the pipe. Right in this area here, for instance, not quite as advanced. So what I'm going to do is I'll try and differentiate the markings. I'm going to mark out the more significant part of the line with X's at each end. Overall, you'll see some of that, but I'll try and notate where the more significant part is in the event you do more of a spot repair. But this area of cast iron in general, often what you see all said and done after jetting it is you can sit and jet till the cows come home, and more rust just keeps coming off the pipe. It's not like the really old stuff where you can jet it out and you've got super healthy bare metal on the other side. It's just unfortunately the reality of this era of cast. So I'm going to locate here and see where we are. I'll be using green marking paint at the very least because of the condition this first part of the line is in, starting 4 feet back inside the home, stretching out here to about 19, 20 feet, something like that. I'll figure that out as we come back in. At the very least, I'd recommend that be repaired. I don't think it's worth jetting it. This second run out here I just did, that hump in the flow line is big, and that usually means your flow line there is getting pretty beat up. And on top of that, versus really old cast iron, you usually have a smooth pipe wall when you're done jetting it. This stuff, you often still have rough, pitted pipe that still has a rough texture to it. All right, so in this spot here, we're under the driveway right now. Once the line turns to straighten out into the driveway, you're about 3 feet approximately in from the right side edge, and the line crossed into the driveway at the bottom right-hand corner of the stamped concrete part of the driveway. Not the driveway skirt, which is the part of the driveway that meets the road, the stamped concrete. It's raining so hard right now, the paint won't even stick. So I'm going to pull back just prior to the driveway. Just understand that cast iron does reach underneath the driveway, about 3 feet approximately. And I was getting a depth there of around 6 feet deep. All right now we're a couple feet from the driveway edge. I'm getting 4 feet deep here. I noticed when I got in the driveway there, my depths were kind of jumpy. The line doesn't tank off very hard, so I think that locate got thrown off a little bit for some odd reason. I don't know if it was interference with something, but I'm getting 4 feet deep right next to the driveway edge. And that locate came in a lot more clear. And I'll put a diagram on the report. Just know that that's not where the actual cast iron ends. That's just where it goes under the driveway. You got to go another about 3 feet in from that edge. And see, right now we're just rounding the front right corner of the patio, the line may actually just barely cross underneath a little bit of that patio. It wouldn't be by very much, and that could be rerouted around if it does go under it a little bit. But I was just thinking here, you know, to avoid having to mess with that stamped concrete, what you could do is trench up to that point and then do a point repair epoxy liner kit. That little bit of cast iron before that joint. And what I would do if you go that route is I would overlap that transition joint to the transite. That way you get a nice overlap and seal on that pipe joint. As the line ages, that'll help to prevent that joint from being exposed to things like roots. But realistically, I would be in the back of my head keeping an eye on that transite too, especially with that nice new concrete there. I don't want to see anyone ripping that up. But as that transite concrete sits right now, it functions fine. But it is something I would probably be rescoping about every other year to monitor it. And that too can also be done by epoxy lining. And what I was just going to say here, if you update this thing all the way up to about the driveway edge, I would highly recommend putting a two-way or a one-way clean out. I would consult a liner company first to find out which access point is best. Usually the directional style is the better one, which is a one-way clean out. That way, when the time comes to update, you can shoot a liner right through that clean out access and hopefully avoid doing any digging from that point on. That's looking down the road a little ways, but I think it's, being that the line is the age it is, I think it's a good idea to be kind of planning for that. So the worst part of the cast iron stops here at about 22 feet. Yeah, the part of the other reason I would be looking into the full update option is the line is very shallow. We're at 2 foot 4 inches deep there. So now where I just marked there at 22 feet, that is on the right side of the patio. You'll see a green X there. Once you get to about the front right corner of the patio, you're going to see a green arrow pointing towards the driveway. Basically from the X on is where the cast iron is in better condition. If you were to do this in parts and pieces, up to 22 feet, that's where I'm seeing the heaviest scale buildup in the line. But when you've got grass and dirt over top, the majority of this cast iron here, at depths that shallow, I think it makes more sense to do a full update rather than to do it in parts and pieces. Especially with the amount of tree foliage you have around here, those transition joints where plastic meets old pipe materials are very, very susceptible to root intrusions. And especially so when you're at shallow depths. Now, at the very least, I would probably get the line descaled if no repairs happen, but again, you need to do that in conjunction with scoping, and just know that you know, sometimes can, you're not always going to have the smoothest pipe result all said and done. They'll be improved, but not like jetting out older cast iron. All right, we're gonna go ahead and reel the camera out here about 1 foot 10 inches deep, just out from the clean out. At the least, what I'm recommending here, because of the standing water and condition of the cast iron, is from 4 feet back inside the house to about 22 feet be updated. That's where the cast iron's roughest. You're going to see on the report, though, that I'm going to be recommending a full update just because I think it's going to make more sense, be more cost effective, and you're going to end up with a better result out of it all said and done. And if you go that route, again, consult the company about doing it's called a point repair liner. It's a short little 5-foot epoxy liner you can do, and you can potentially do that trenchlessly from the edge of the driveway. That way you can hopefully avoid having to mess with cutting into that driveway and having a patch there in that stamped concrete. Make sure rescoping is performed after any repairs are done and or drain cleaning work, should you go that route. And if the line is merely drain cleaned and jetted out, I would be rescoping this on a yearly basis to keep an eye on things until you're ready to do any updating on it.